Crooks and Liars has an interesting article out about an issue where Jeb Bush is surprisingly liberal. So that issue is spending on medical research, and specifically certain kinds of medical research. He's become more open-minded when it comes to specific issues. So they say the following, quote, Mr. Bush's comments signal that if he runs for president and wins, he would be willing to reverse some of the spending cuts to medical research that Republicans have pushed for in recent years during budget battles. So right off the bat here, what they're referring to is the sequester, among other things as well, where the Republicans have said, yeah, let's just take a hatchet to science funding, to education funding, to NASA funding, and anything we can get our hands on that's actually helpful, let's cut that stuff so that we can give more money to the people on Wall Street and to big banks and to the military-industrial complex and to the areas where we don't need it. So that's the general idea they're getting at here. They continue and say, former Governor Jeb Bush opened up last week about how his mother-in-law's affliction with Alzheimer's disease, and on Tuesday shed some light on what he thinks should be done to fight the illness. In an email exchange with Maria Shriver, of course, the journalist, activist, and author, Mr. Bush wrote that he has been getting a lot of feedback since revealing that his family has firsthand experience with the disease. As for how he would address Alzheimer's disease, Mr. Bush called for more research funding and a faster drug approval process. Okay. So, credit to him. I mean, this is clearly a case where he was on the wrong side of the issue, and now he's on the right side of the issue. And he's saying, no, this is what government is really for. I mean, companies, private companies, have a hard time investing in specific cures for specific drugs because they don't know how promising the preliminary research is, and they don't want to dump in $2 billion to fund something to maybe at some point down the road only making $1 billion back, so they net lose $1 billion in the process. So private funding and in the capitalist sector, they don't really want to deal with this stuff. So what Jeb Bush is saying is, okay, come on, guys, this is one area where we can spend more. This is an area where the government is absolutely needed. So all systems go, let's attack it. Credit on that front, and I mean that too. But here's the only problem with it, and you knew that this point was coming. The only reason he is increasing funding for medical research in this one specific area, or he wants to do it in this one specific area, is because it affects him personally. So he has firsthand experience with it, and he's saying, yeah, that thing is fucked up, man. I saw it with my own two eyes. Somebody I love is directly affected by it. It's my mother-in-law. I like my mother-in-law. Geez, we got to do something about this. This is crazy. But this is the problem with Republicans that we talk about every day on the show, is that they're incredibly myopic. If it doesn't affect them personally, it doesn't exist to them. And in the article in Crooks and Liars, they go on to give some fantastic examples, too. They say, have we seen this elsewhere? Then they talk about how, well, some Republicans have softened on the issue of gay marriage. Who? Well, Dick Cheney. Why? His daughter's gay. Rob Portman. He softened, too. Why? His son is gay. John McCain is a liberal on the issue of torture. Why? He was tortured in Vietnam. Grover Norquist is one of the few Republicans who actually says nice shit about Muslims. Why? He's married to a Palestinian Muslim. So whenever they personally experience something, they go, oh yeah, the liberals were totally right on this issue. You think maybe we might be right on the other issues as well, but since you don't have firsthand experience with it, you can't open up your mind enough to realize it? See, that's the problem. They're incapable of doing basic intellectual exercises where they try to view the world through the eyes of somebody else. They try to say, okay, how would I feel in X scenario? And then you fill in the blank. Liberals, it's almost like we do that immediately. That's the first thing we do, because we try to understand all sides of an issue and we try to get all the facts down before we make up our mind. The Republicans just think along the lines of, you know, does it affect me in any way? All right, well, then I'm only in favor of things that help me. I don't give a fuck about nobody else. And that's why, for example, you see another example of clear hypocrisy when it comes to the food stamp bill, or actually it's specifically the farm bill. And what happens every year, every time they have to vote on the farm bill again? you have Republicans ranting and raving about how we need to gut food stamps, which is part of the Farm Bill. They say, gut that, that's big government spending. We're not in favor of big government spending. It creates lazy people, moochers, parasites, you name it. Then in the same bill where they're talking about cutting food stamps for people to feed their kids when they don't make enough money, they give themselves and their family farms tremendous subsidies, taxpayer subsidies. So in other words, welfare for me and my family and my buddies is totally cool. It doesn't make us lazy. It doesn't make us moochers. It doesn't make us parasites. But when we give a much smaller dollar amount to people who need the food to feed their fucking kids, well, they're lazy, they're moochers, they're parasites. In other words, it's a clear double standard, and they build it into their ideology. It's almost like they're cool with double standards, and they don't even realize that that concept exists. So it drives me fucking crazy, man. Just to give one more example, but I could go on all day. It's what I do for a living. Chris Christie. Chris Christie would lecture in New Jersey about the virtues of small government and pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, and we don't need the stinking feds. The second Hurricane Sandy hit, what did he do? He went to FEMA, hat in hand, saying, I want 100% reimbursement for the damage in my state. What happened to bootstraps? What happened to small government? What happened to we don't need the stinking feds? The federal law says you get 80% reimbursement in funding. Even that, that wasn't enough for Chris Christie. If he was really being principled about this idea that fuck the feds, we don't need them, that's what he said, that's not what I'm saying, he said that, well then he should be out there arguing for, you know what, we don't even need 80%. Never mind 100%. Give us 0. We got this. Because we're actually, we're not lazy. We are going to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. And you see the same shit with disaster funding in all the different states. Republicans in the Midwest and in the South voted against FEMA funding for relief for Sandy because that hit the Northeast where they don't fucking know anybody. But when it came to their state, when they had to deal with droughts or tornadoes or other shit, they were like, okay, now we need FEMA funding. Well, asshole, why were you against it for Hurricane Sandy, but now you're for it for a tornado or for whatever's happening in your state? Because it affects them personally. Open up your fucking mind, man. Be reasonable. Be objective. Try to not just think about it through a closed-minded perspective.